Hi, you're a human. You want stuff. A house, a phone, a burrito the size of your forearm. But you don't own a factory, a farm, or a burrito empire. So how do you get the stuff? Someone else makes it, you give them money, they give you the stuff, everyone smiles, capitalism happens. Congratulations, you just lived through the entire system in one sentence. Unfortunately for you, this video is 13 minutes long, so let's make it worse. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of property and the means of production, where individuals, not the government, decide what to make, how to make it, and who gets it. Translation: you can own a business, a building, a blender empire, whatever, and nobody in a suit is allowed to just take it. That's the whole foundation. Private property rights. If you can't own stuff, you can't sell stuff, and if you can't sell stuff, capitalism just becomes a guy standing in a field yelling about pizza he's not allowed to have. So where did this come from? Once upon a time, most economies ran on feudalism. You worked land you didn't own for a lord who did, and in exchange, you got the privilege of also working next year. Great deal. Then came the Industrial Revolution, factories, steam engines, banking systems, and suddenly there's this idea floating around, mostly thanks to a guy named Adam Smith, that maybe, just maybe, people pursuing their own self-interest could accidentally organize an entire economy better than a king yelling orders. He called this the invisible hand. Not magic, not a ghost. Just millions of selfish decisions accidentally adding up to something efficient. You want cheap bread, the baker wants profit, and somehow everyone gets fed. Nobody planned it. It just happens. Okay, so how does it actually work? 4 ingredients. 1, private property. You can own stuff and do what you want with it mostly. 2, free markets. Prices are set by supply and demand, not a government spreadsheet. 3, profit motive. People start businesses because they want money, not because they love humanity, though occasionally both happen at once, allegedly. 4, competition. Multiple businesses fighting for your money, which keeps prices low and quality high, unless they all secretly agree not to compete, which is illegal and also extremely common. Let's talk about prices, because prices are the actual language of capitalism. Everything you need to know gets encoded into a number. If oil gets scarce, prices go up, and suddenly everyone from truckers to teenagers with mopeds adjusts their behavior without a single meeting happening. No central planner had to tell 12 million people to drive less. The price did it for them. That's the efficiency argument for capitalism. Nobody's smart enough to plan an entire economy, but a price can quietly coordinate billions of decisions a day without anyone in charge. Now, who provides all this stuff? Businesses. And businesses exist to make profit, which is revenue minus costs. Sounds simple. It's not, because to make profit, you have to convince other humans to give you money voluntarily, repeatedly, forever. And humans are unpredictable, cheap, and easily distracted by shiny competitors. So businesses compete. They lower prices, improve quality, or invent something you didn't know you needed, like a toaster that talks to your phone for absolutely no reason. This competition is supposed to benefit you, the consumer, because businesses that don't improve just die, and businesses that do improve get to keep existing. It's evolution, but for vacuum cleaners, this is also where capital comes in, and no, not the city kind. Capital means the tools, machines, buildings, and money used to produce more stuff. A hammer is capital. A factory is capital. A guy's crypto wallet is, debatably, capital. Capitalism is called capitalism because capital, specifically privately owned capital, is the engine that drives production. You don't need the government to build a factory. You need someone with capital who thinks they can make money doing it, and is willing to risk that money to find out. Which brings us to risk, the unsexy hero of this whole story. Entrepreneurs risk their capital, their time, their sanity, and sometimes their marriage on the bet that people will actually want what they're building. Most of the time, they're wrong. Around 20% of new businesses fail in the first year, and about half are gone within 5. Capitalism doesn't reward effort. It rewards being useful to other people repeatedly without running out of money first. Now here's the part that makes capitalism controversial. Prices aren't just numbers, they're also incentives, and incentives don't care about your feelings. If a factory can make more profit paying workers less, it will try. If a company can dump waste into a river for free instead of disposing of it properly, some will until someone stops them. This is called an externality, a cost or benefit that spills onto people who weren't part of the transaction. You didn't agree to breathe factory smoke, but here you are, breathing factory smoke. Capitalism is extremely good at pricing what's inside the transaction and extremely bad at pricing what's outside it, unless a government forces it to. Speaking of governments, let's kill a myth right now. Pure, unregulated, government-free capitalism barely exists anywhere, and where it has existed, it's usually gone badly. What we actually have almost everywhere, including the United States, is a mixed economy. Markets do most of the work, but the government sets rules, taxes income, funds public goods, and occasionally steps in to stop capitalism from capitalisming itself into a monopoly-owned wasteland. Laissez-faire capitalism, the hands-off version, sounds great until you remember laissez-faire also gave us child labor, unregulated banks, and food so contaminated they had to invent the FDA out of sheer horror. So governments regulate. Antitrust laws exist to stop companies from becoming so dominant they can crush competition and then just charge whatever they want. This matters because capitalism's magic trick, competition keeping prices fair, only works if competition actually exists. A monopoly is what happens when one company wins so hard there's no one left to compete with. At that point, the invisible hand isn't coordinating anything, it's just one company doing whatever it wants while wearing the invisible hand as a costume. Let's talk labor, because in capitalism, most people don't own capital, they sell labor. You trade your time and skills for wages. The company profits from the difference between what your work is worth and what they pay you. That gap is essentially where profit comes from. Karl Marx had thoughts about this. He called it exploitation, arguing that workers create more value than they're paid, and capitalists pocket the difference, calling it profit instead of theft. Whether you buy that argument or not, it's the philosophical seed of basically every critique of capitalism that came after it. Marx predicted capitalism would collapse under its own inequality and get replaced by socialism, then communism. Spoiler, that mostly didn't happen the way he thought. But the inequality part, he wasn't wrong about that showing up. Which brings us to inequality, capitalism's least favorite topic at dinner parties. Because capitalism rewards owning capital more than it rewards labor, and capital compounds. If you own stock, real estate, or a business, your wealth can grow while you sleep. If you only have labor to sell, your income mostly grows when someone decides to pay you more, which historically doesn't happen nearly as often. This is why, over time, capitalist economies tend to concentrate wealth at the top unless something, taxes, unions, regulation, actively pushes back. Thomas Piketty wrote an entire, extremely long book about this, and the short version is, when returns on capital outpace economic growth, rich people get richer faster than everyone else gets anything. Okay, let's zoom into the stock market, because this is where capitalism gets its casino energy. A stock is a tiny slice of ownership in a company. When you buy one, you're betting the company will be worth more later. Stock markets let businesses raise money by selling ownership instead of just taking out loans, and they let regular people theoretically share in economic growth. In practice, roughly half of Americans own no stock at all, so the market's up mostly means good news for people who already had money to invest in the first place. The market isn't the economy. It's a mood ring for people with spare cash. Now, let's talk about a concept that makes capitalism genuinely brilliant and genuinely brutal at the same time. Creative destruction. An economist named Joseph Schumpeter coined it, and the idea is simple. Capitalism doesn't improve by fixing old industries, it improves by killing them and replacing them with something better. Horse carriages died so cars could live. Blockbuster died so Netflix could live. Netflix will eventually die so something you haven't heard of yet can live. This constant churn is why capitalist economies innovate so fast, and it's also why entire towns built around one dying industry get absolutely wrecked with zero warning. Progress and destruction are the same event, just viewed from different bank accounts. So does capitalism actually work? Depends who you ask, and when. Capitalist economies have produced more wealth, technology, and rising living standards in the last 2 centuries than every previous economic system combined. Extreme poverty worldwide has dropped dramatically since the mid-1900s, largely riding on market-driven growth, especially in places like China and India that opened up to markets while keeping heavy state involvement, which, plot twist, means even capitalist miracles often had a government hand steering the wheel. Meanwhile, critics point out that capitalism doesn't self-correct for inequality, environmental destruction, or financial crashes. It just keeps optimizing for profit. Consequences optional, unless someone makes the consequences expensive. Which brings us to boom and bust, capitalism's mood swings. Because capitalism runs on confidence, credit, and speculation, it doesn't grow in a straight line, it grows in cycles. Optimism drives investment, investment drives growth, growth drives more optimism, until eventually people get so confident they start making genuinely unhinged financial decisions, prices detach from reality, and then it collapses. That's a bubble. The 2008 financial crisis happened partly because banks packaged risky mortgages into investments everyone treated as safe, until suddenly nobody could pay their mortgage, and the whole architecture folded like a lawn chair. Capitalism doesn't just tolerate crashes, it kind of requires them. They're the system correcting its own excesses, violently and usually at the expense of people who had nothing to do with causing them. Now let's compare flavors, because not all capitalism looks the same. Laissez-faire capitalism, minimal government, maximum figure it out yourself. Welfare capitalism, markets plus a strong safety net, think Scandinavia, high taxes, but also free healthcare and education, capitalism with a seatbelt on. State capitalism, the government owns or heavily controls major industries while still running markets. Think China, where the party sets the direction but companies still compete and profit. Crony capitalism, where success depends less on innovation and more on who you know in government, contracts, and favors instead of competition. Basically capitalism cosplaying as itself. And for contrast, because you can't fully understand capitalism without its opposite, socialism generally means the means of production are owned collectively by the state, by workers, or by the community, rather than private individuals, aiming to prioritize equality and shared benefit over profit. Most real-world socialist countries you hear about today, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, are actually capitalist market economies with generous welfare systems, not socialism in the textbook sense. They just get called that a lot, incorrectly, at parties. Actual command economies, where the government plans production directly instead of markets like the Soviet Union, tend to struggle with efficiency because it turns out coordinating an entire economy from one office is exactly as hard as it sounds, and shortages become a lifestyle. So here's the honest, unsatisfying truth economics textbooks eventually admit. There is no perfectly pure capitalist economy anywhere on Earth, and there probably never will be. Every functioning modern economy is a blend, markets doing the heavy lifting, government stepping in to handle the stuff markets are bad at, public goods, monopolies, pollution, safety nets. The real debate isn't capitalism versus no capitalism. It's how much government intervention is the right amount, and that argument has been running for 200 years with no sign of quitting. So, what's the actual verdict? Capitalism is extraordinarily good at one specific thing, generating growth and innovation by rewarding people who create value other people are willing to pay for. It is extraordinarily bad at a few other specific things, distributing that growth evenly, protecting things markets can't price, like clean air or fair starting points, and stopping itself before things go too far. It's not evil, and it's not perfect. It's a machine, an incredibly powerful one, that runs on incentives instead of intentions, and produces exactly what it's built to produce. More stuff, more efficiently, for whoever can pay for it, and not necessarily fairness for whoever can't. And that's capitalism. All of it. Well, almost all of it, explained fast. If you got something out of this and want a part 2, comparing capitalism against socialism and communism head to head, you know what to do.